Eric Shesky's Weekly You Demon. This Catholic dude abides. Culture, society, drinking, philosophy, religion, even politics. Sometimes drunk, often smiling. He's never out of his element. So sit back with a sarsaparilla, fasten your thinking seatbelt, and enjoy.
Man, I really like that guy's voice. We'll be hearing more from him as the podcast moves forward. Great show this week. We're talking a lot of Zen. Going to give you a big introduction to it per popular request. We're going to dive into the Middle Ages, going to do some Saint Week and a few other things. I want to talk a little bit more about primary obligations. Got some good feedback last week, and so I wanted to just raise a few real quick points. First off, if you have no kids or one kid, no one's saying that, you should volunteer more. That's not the point of the primary obligation analysis. The primary obligation analysis is not to beat someone with it. It's strictly a tool to measure yourself with and your own honesty. Quite frankly, I believe strongly the cliche, don't judge someone till you walk a mile in their shoes, which, quite frankly, is something you're probably never going to do unless you know someone really, really, really well. So some guy may have no children, not married, but maybe he has both his parents living with him with severe Alzheimer's, and he's up 24 hours a day trying to take care of them or whatever. You just don't know. So again, that's not a stick to beat someone with. Secondly, does it mean that if you have someone with a lot of kids or sick parents at home or whatever, that you should expect less out of them? Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, it's just like in my service club, we have some people in their 80s and they just can't do all the volunteer work that others can do. It's that station in life. And you love the person and you accept them and you take what you can get. And that's kind of the way it'll be with someone with a lot of kids or a sickly wife or whatever the primary obligation might be. You just got to accept it. That's all there is to it. Third point, you got to guard against a thing that Leo Tolstoy, called family narcissism, which basically goes, the world can go to hell just as long as everything is okay with my little Andre. That's not a good attitude to have. And I've been guilty of it. And it's something you just have to guard against constantly. And I also want to throw out one last thing that doesn't really pertain to this topic, but I know quite a few of my listeners are people in their 20s, and they have little kids at home, and I want to throw a life preserver to you. On 2 different occasions, I had 3 kids at home that were preschoolers. My first 3 children, and then my last 3 children. It was terrible. And if I would mention to someone who was older than me who had kids that, gosh, it's just, just awful, couldn't get to bed till 10:30, one of the kids was throwing up, whatever, a lot of them would just respond, oh, wait till they get older, it gets a lot worse. When they have all these sporting events you have to go through and band events, whatever. And that's, well, first off, it's just mean to say that. And secondly, it's just BS. If you have little kids at home, I mean, you are constantly under siege. I mean, you can't even go to the bathroom without shutting the door if you got an 18-month-old wandering around outside. With the sporting events, yeah, it's very time-consuming. Yeah, it definitely is, and I would be lying if I didn't say it didn't bum me out once in a while. But the bottom line is, they're voluntary. Yes, you should go to them if you're a good parent, and it's important to your kid. It should be important to you, but your kid ain't gonna die. Like the 2-year-old's going to fall in the pool if you take a dump with the door shut. So, again, it's very different. When you have little kids, you're like in this constant siege mentality. It's like they constantly need your help unless they're sleeping. It's not like that with older kids at sporting events. Time-consuming, yes, but psychologically, emotionally, it's a totally different world. So it does get better, trust me. I'm really intrigued at how many people like the discussion of the Eastern religions, especially Zen. When I did a theology on tap session, I had a few people approach me later and say, boy, I wish I'd gone to that session. I heard you talked about Zen. Any chance of doing it again? I've had one listener contact me and said, boy, I really wish you'd talk more about Zen. And these are all Catholics, or at least Christians. There's this I don't know, the intense interest in Zen. So, as the guy in the introduction said, this Catholic dude abides. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking Zen. It'll probably become a regular feature. Maybe not every episode, but I'm going to try to touch on something a couple times a month. So, what is Zen? Well, in my opinion, it's the most highly developed thought that's not religious, because Zen is not a religion. Now, some people call it, one guy named, I think Henry de Moulin, I'm probably not pronouncing that, he was a Jesuit who wrote a two-volume history of Zen. He called it a natural mysticism. And I kind of like that, for reasons that may or may not become clear as we go through it. I should state that the mere act of talking about Zen is considered ignorance of Zen. So the mere fact I'm doing it here might make me a Zidiot, which is basically saying, I'm ignorant of Zen, but I'm talking about Zen like I know something about it, but I'm ignorant as evidenced by the mere fact I'm talking about it. It makes me a Zidiot. But we're going to try it anyway, because there's no way to get to, there's no way to explain something without talking about it, even if the mere act of talking about it is contrary to the spirit of Zen. So what is it? Well, just a little bit of background. Even though Zen is not a religion, it is steeped in Buddhism. That means its roots are in a thing called pantheistic monism. That is the belief that God is the world and all is one. And they refer to that as Brahman, B-R-A-H-M-A-N. I'm Brahman, you're Brahman, that chair is Brahman, everything is Brahman. If you think you perceive a distinction between you and something else, you're caught in an illusion. Maya, M-A-Y-A. Zen seeks to crash through all distinctions. No subject-object. You can kind of focus on that phrase. No subject-object. There's no me-you. There's no this and that. There's just being. One of the most famous Zen sayings is, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. That's kind of a stark statement. But basically you're saying, if you see a distinction, i.e., if you see the Buddha, if you see a distinction, you're experiencing a mistake, and you're in error, so you want to kill it. So the whole pursuit of Zen is to get past this subject-object type perception that we all have. That the Zen adept seeks to see with the eyes of a little child. Little children, I'm talking like, I guess before age 4, they don't see themselves, and we know this psychologically, they don't see themselves as me and them. It's like this, everything is the little child. They don't filter anything through a conscious ego. They see something, they like it, and they're gleeful. That's why they're so much fun to be around. And they're kind of funny when they get angry, partly because they're so powerless they can't hurt you when they're angry, but also because it's just, they're unhappy and they wear it on their sleeve. Everything is worn on their sleeve. And then they're not looking for the emotional, part of being a child, but they are looking at like the sheer joy of being a child, where you just look out and see. So when you think about the Zen attitude, you can think of it as being just, just look, just see, just enjoy. Don't think about yourself looking, seeing, enjoying. Just look, see, enjoy. And that's crucial. If you start thinking about yourself enjoying, you've completely left the Zen attitude. You've lapsed back into subject yourself and object. What am I enjoying? That's one reason I hate the selfie. I see people like in a gorgeous moment that they ought to just be taking in, and they whip out the camera and they want to get a selfie, take a picture of themselves with it. There is nothing more anti-Zen than the selfie in a moment of joy. And then that's crucial to understand. I'm not saying the selfie is anti-Zen, although I suppose it is, but I'm saying people, they're wrapped. I remember seeing, I'll give you an example. This dude had his nachos ruined at a baseball game, professional baseball game, by a player going after a foul ball. The next inning, the player brought him out a new plate of nachos. Kind of a touchy, PR, cute type thing. And the dude was really ecstatic, and then he's like, oh, let me get me a selfie, take a picture with this baseball player. And so instead of just enjoying it, he immediately shifted to, let's look at me enjoying it. And there's a huge difference there that Zen, I don't want to say hates it, because it doesn't really hate anything, but there's a huge distinction there that, just think about it. There's a philosopher named, I think it's Alexander, I can't remember his name, gosh darn it. C.S. Lewis cites him. He's an Australian philosopher, and he makes that crucial distinction between enjoying something and observing the enjoying. And that's kind of a Zen-like observation. You just do this, just do that, but don't think of yourself doing it. And I'm going to flush all this out in future episodes, but that hopefully gives you enough of a starting point to start getting into this, this very tricky but beautiful mode of natural thought. Alright, I want to touch on something I've been wanting to possibly make into a regular feature in this podcast. Kind of like I want to touch on Zen regularly from this point forward. I might do this as well. Touching on the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages have been much maligned, for centuries. It pretty much started with the French Enlightenment, and also the French Enlightenment pretty much just scoffed at everything that was Catholic and looked at themselves as a launching point of a great new world, basically. And then you have the dominant Whig, W-H-I-G theory of history, or practice of history. It basically looks at the whole Western world is just one of great progress, leaving behind the superstitions of the Middle Ages. And Protestantism is the great and glorious future. So, with those two quote-unquote traditions, the Middle Ages have always just been kind of maligned as the Dark Ages. And I want to hasten to add, that's not the view anymore among historians. And this is a very recent development, like in the past 20 years. I mean, we'll go back 30 years ago, you ask most historians about the Middle Ages, they'd be like, yeah, I had to take an introductory course at one point, in college about the Middle Ages, that was the time that sucked. You ask them now, and they say, this is the most understudied area of history. It's a fascinating era, and there's more discoveries being made every day. I mean, we're finding out more stuff about the Middle Ages than we knew about Rome, which, predated the Middle Ages. So I just want to, I want to emphasize and encourage you to start studying the Middle Ages. Again, fascinating stuff. This is Lord of the Ring type ages. And we're talking about the era from about 650 to 1500. That's how I'm going to define it. And I'm going to give you just a quick summary, just a sketch of this overview of this era, rather. So you had the fall of the Roman Empire, often dated to 476. That's ridiculous. All that happened with the Roman Empire is you had Rome developed in Rome. It got so big it couldn't be managed from one center, so Diocletian in the 3rd century split it into two: Rome in the west, Constantinople in the east. In 476, the Rome part fell out, and only Constantinople ruled, but it still ruled in Italy. Its reach was greatly limited, and a lot of the Ostrogoths kind of ran things, but they said, hey, we're loyal to Rome. So that's what happened in 476. Basically, there was no longer an emperor in Rome. The emperor was strictly in Constantinople. It was basically just a permanent change of address. And, if you had asked the average Roman citizen, or excuse me, if you'd asked, the average person in Lyon, France in 600 AD, are you a Roman citizen? He'd be like, yeah, of course I am. I mean, everything's still Roman. So to say that Rome fell in 476 just really doesn't make sense. But by 650 or so, which is where I'm starting my date, my Middle Ages, things really were a wreck in the West. There was virtually no reach from Constantinople into the West, Italy. At that point, much less France or Spain. Things had been pretty much just been run by barbarian kings for years. And you've had the Muslim conquest coming into scope, wreaking havoc on the grain trade out of Egypt into Italy. And again, the Vandals had done some of that already, but things became really bad when the Muslims became powerful in the early 7th century, early 600s, and pretty much disrupted trade in Western Europe. Things got so bad that there's actually a group of people out there, and I don't think they're nuts. I guess they're probably nuts, but it's fascinating. They basically take the position that the years like 650 to 800 didn't even exist. They're a fiction. So right now, we're not in the year 2018. We're like in the year, what would that be, 1800 something. 1860, the Civil War, because we're 150 years too far, because those 150 years, there's such a freaking train wreck. These people have, I don't want to say plausibly, but interestingly, said those 150 years never even existed. So that's the starting point. That's 650, 800, beginning of the Middle Ages, completely, unequivocally sucked. And then you had Charlemagne, what they call the Carolingian revival in France, stretching to Germany and northern Italy. Things looked a little bit better. And then after Charlemagne, you had what you call the Iron Age, or the Dark Ages, descend. Europe was besieged from every side. You had Muslims pushing in from the south. You had massive Viking hordes coming in from the north. You had Magyars coming in out of the Central Asian steppes. It was terrible. For like 200 years, Europe was just under siege. In 1000, Europe starts coming out of it. So the 1000, like from 1000 AD to 1100, Europe starts coming out of the Dark Ages, and you have pretty much the dawn of the real Middle Ages. And then in the 1100s, you have Europe starting to get wealthy, actually kind of going on the offensive in some areas against their They Christianized a lot of the Vikings and Magyars, but start going on the offensive against Muslims. Got so wealthy in that century that you had St. Francis and St. Dominic come into existence saying, hey, we need to get back to poverty, the concept of Christian poverty. The Catholic Church has always had this counterpoise. They're always balancing excesses. The 1200s are considered the height of the Middle Ages. You have universities coming into their own. You have St. Thomas Aquinas' thought. That is a great time. A great time to be a medievalist in the 1200s. 1300s, everything sucks again. You have the 100 Years' War with the Joan of Arc type stuff, that a lot of devastation in France. And you had the Black Plague. And we'll talk about the Black Plague. That was devastation on a level that we cannot even imagine. People talk about the Great Flu of, I think, 1919. It was terrible. Not like the Black Plague, though. It took Europe over 100 years to recover from the last signs of the Black Plague. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. And then you have the 1400s. Europe starts trying to come out of the effects of the Black Plague. Populations start to grow again, but you have a lot of corruption. And then you hit into the 1500s, which is the Reformation. And again, we're going to start revisiting all the stuff, starting with Rome, kind of hitting little segments here and there, but I'll try to make the Middle Ages a steady feature of this podcast. Welcome to the third week of Saint Month, the month of October. It's a good week. We got Saint Luke the Evangelist. That's a big one, obviously, but I want to focus on two others. First, you got Saint Ignatius of Antioch. This guy is fascinating. He was a very early bishop martyr to the faith. He was transported from Antioch to Rome to be killed in the Trajan persecutions. In the course of being transported, he wrote 7 epistles to the Christian communities. And in those epistles, we have basically very, very, very early evidence of a lot of the Catholic dogmas that are rejected by our Christian brother, and you can already see them in development in the letters of St. Ignatius. Let's wrap up with a few housekeeping matters. First, I want to thank the Crevulators for the music today. They don't know who I am. I got the music at Free Music Archive, but I love these guys. This rockabilly sound is just amazing. I think the lead is a guy named Mike Cobb. He says, quote, "I get drunk, I get stoned. I'll do anything I can just to move myself along." And yeah, this music has that rockabilly, I don't care type. They call it, I think, retro rock or something like that, but highly recommend it. Really, really enjoyed listening to it. If you weren't aware, the Weekly Demon has its own website now. Listenership has been good enough that I decided to take the plunge, went and got a site at Squarespace, an actual paid site, and launched it. You can find it at Udemon Podcasts, udemonpodcasts.com. So go check it out. You'll see me developing the show notes and other things that make a successful podcast in the long run. And that's it for this week. I appreciate you listening. Again, tell your friends, tell your family. Please go to iTunes and leave a review. And by the way, go to the correct iTunes feed. There's going to be 2 concurrent feeds running for a while. I'm going to try to feed the old one into the new one. But that's some technology. It's not always my strongest suit. But make sure if you go to iTunes and you follow the correct Weekly Demon feed, which only has 4 episodes, so it's kind of easy to see which is which. But leave a review, give it a good rating, tell your friends, family, post it to Facebook, Twitter. I really appreciate it. Have a good week, everyone.